This is the third session in terms of our series of promoting community awareness and adaptation to climate challenges that we're all well aware of. And indeed, on Saturday and before, I think people voted very strongly to express their concern indeed. I just want to note up front that this series really wouldn't be possible without the support of the Victorian government, especially through Climate Ready Hume. And there's some information that Daniel is here and has kindly brought with him at the back near all those delicious eats, if you want to scan some of the very interesting things. But they've been our great supporter as part of, course, the Victorian government. But I have to say that the series really wouldn't have been possible without the enthusiasm of Elaine Furness. And it's a great sadness to us all that she did have a nasty accident and it has confined her for some time. But she, through 2030 Yea, approached us here at the Yea Wetlands Discovery Centre for a partnership, because we had run a series earlier of lectures and a number of you were here. And indeed, so we put in a joint application and indeed we got the funding for that. So if the proposition was to produce these through series, and in fact, this is the third, as I said. Tonight, we're very fortunate, really, to have two terrific speakers. Lucinda Flynn is going to really start the discussion this evening about her role, as I understand it, Lucinda, is a home energy efficiency assessor. She'll come into your home and do an assessment, as I understand, and no doubt she'll tell us all about that activity that she undertakes. And clearly that's very important. We heard a little about that, Lucinda, when Saul Griffith spoke at a previous lecture about how to improve, but he focused really on electricity and energy efficiency there. So you really complement him very well indeed. So that's the first talk. The second talk is by Glen Morris, who's the General Manager of the Smart Energy Lab. And I don't think that Glen conveys really the most interesting work, and I'm sure you're going to tell about it. If you go to Glen's website, it's a fountain of information there about what he has done. And what fascinated me, that he road tests a number of renewable hardware as to how efficient they are and provide some certification. And no doubt he'll tell us about his Tuberong property in the Yarra Ranges, where much of this is undertaken. So I'll try not to steal your thunder there. But these are two interesting talks. Lucinda will start first, and we'll take her talk, and then we'll go directly to Glen's talk, and then after that we'll have the questions. So without further ado, Lucinda, thank you very much for coming, and look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's really great to be here. My name's Lucinda. I live in Hurstbridge, which isn't too far away. And yes, I work as a home energy efficiency assessor. It's a job I absolutely love because, well, first of all, I like people and I really like going and meeting people all over the place. But I find the topic of home energy efficiency really fascinating and very exciting, because every single one of us lives in a home and there's pretty much always things that people can do, no matter what their budget is. If they've got no budget, there's still things they can do to make their homes more comfortable. So I really enjoy talking with people about that, and often that feeling of reassuring people that they don't need to go out and buy, you know, an electric car and a big solar system and those sort of things, which is out of reach for some people, but they can just do simple things like cutting up cardboard and creating pelmets on top of their curtains and things like that. So well, in this presentation, what I'd like to do is just talk about some really practical things that I feel like all people can do without much effort in many ways. I'm just so you know, I'm part of the local clean energy group where I am, but I'm also really into food gardening and sustainability in general. So I'm interested in all the daily things like waste and worms and compost and, all that. So the three things that I want to talk about, the first two will be rather more brief and the third one will be longer. So the first two things that I think everyone can do is, one is considering our money. Now, whether we like it or not, we live in a country where things run on money. We exchange money for goods and services. And so how we choose to deal with our money, it can be a really powerful voice in pushing for what we believe in and what matters to us. I'll talk about some examples of that in a minute. But another thing is just buying less stuff. And I don't mean using less stuff, really. I think that we all will still have plenty of opportunity to use stuff, but I think we need to rethink how we get our hands on it. I'll talk about that in a minute too. And home energy efficiency, the third topic, is my favourite one. So that'll be the majority of what I talk about tonight. What does your money support? Three examples of this are how we bank, where we put our investments, and the common one for everyone is their superannuation, and then general purchases like utilities and shopping and things. So for banks, such a simple thing you can do is just choose to bank with someone who isn't going to be supporting fossil fuels, who has ethical considerations for their, the people that bank there. And another thing you can do is choose somebody that's B Corp certified. Who has heard of a B Corp certified business? Has anyone heard of it? You have? Great. Well, I'm hopeful that sooner or later everyone in the room will know what it is and it'll become more and more common. As an example for banking, now this isn't an endorsement of any particular bank or the other ones that I'm going to talk about, but it's just an example of choosing something that reflects your values. Bank Australia is a customer-owned bank. It has a responsible banking policy and it's a B Corp certified business. Now, a B Corp certified business is one that has shown that it balances profit with purpose. It's quite difficult to become B Corp certified, and you have to show in 5 areas: governance, community, environment, workers and customers, that you are considering more than just profits, that you're considering the environment, social equity and all those sort of things. A lot of us open a bank account when we're a teenager and many people never change it after that. But by just making a conscious choice and changing it, it might be a little bit of effort in the beginning, but then it's set and forget. You don't really need to do anything more about it. So I don't encourage everyone to think about where their money is. The same exact thing goes with any sort of investments, including super. And an example of, hang on. I thought I was going down, but I was doing something else. Australian ethical superannuation, you might have heard of it. There's different sorts of superannuation companies, but again, that one is a B Corp certified business, which if you're interested, look up B Corp certified. It's a growing worldwide community, and I think it's really great to support businesses that have put such effort into showing that they care. Now, general purchases, of course, is pretty much everything else. And a great example is utilities. Was anyone with PowerShop until recently? Yes. Did you change when they were bought by Shell? Yeah. Actually, many people were with PowerShop and many people stopped being with PowerShop when Shell bought it because they didn't want to support a company that supports fossil fuels. And that's another example of just making a choice to support what matters to you. Now, buying less stuff. I have teenage daughters who still think that going shopping is a way to catch up with your friends. What about you guys in the back? Do you think that too? Yeah, fair enough. It can be, but I actually find that not buying stuff is a way to catch up with my friends. And the way that works is that when you decide to buy less stuff, you are forced to go and borrow things and share things and swap things, which brings you into the community. It means that you still get access to the stuff that you need, and it also means that other people in the community get stuff that they need. In fact, if you ask somebody to borrow something, they're much more likely to feel like they can ask you to borrow something back. Who would you go to borrow something if you ran out of sugar. You'd go to the one who asked you, you know. Examples of this in action, there are many, many. I'm not sure what's around in Yea.
There's a repair cafe in Alexandra.
Oh, fantastic. Yes. So repair cafes, do people know roughly what they are? Has anyone heard of it? Yep.
Yeah.
They're amazing, and we've just started one in Hurstbridge. And going there, helping, I mean, I knew what it was already, but by going there and taking a couple of things, I actually realised that there are all sorts of other things in my house that I could take there as well that I'd never even thought of. So I think as those become popular, it will increase all of our enthusiasm for repairing stuff rather than chucking it. Other things are things like a library of tools, a tool library. You might have heard of that. And we're also trying to get a library of things started in Hurstbridge. It's pretty much all of those things that people have that you don't need all the time, like preserving kits and snow gear for your once yearly trip to the snow, and mowers and tools and, you know, things like that. A great way means that if you buy something that's good quality, you can then share it and it gets a lot more use than everyone buying their own cheap thing that only lasts a short time. Then, of course, there's food swaps, seed swaps, free goods groups where you just offer other people things that you don't need anymore. Working bees, I'm a really big fan of working bees. We have one that's been going for years with, I think, 6 local families, and every 2 weeks we go to someone else's place and we either garden or we lug gravel or we paint, or, you know, and it's just amazing. And so that's what I mean. It gets me out to see my friends, is sharing things. So here we are on to home energy efficiency. The amazing things about home energy efficiency are that you can end up being a lot more comfortable while paying less and reducing your contribution to climate change, of course, by using less fuel. An example of this is I did an energy assessment for someone and I gave them all these recommendations, and then they wanted me to come back and do another energy assessment, a scorecard assessment, to see how their rating had changed. And they made a comment to me. They said, we used to have this terrible house, we had a few plug-in heaters, and we used to pay $300 a month in electricity, and we were always cold. Now they have 2 efficient reverse cycle air conditioners. They pay $120 a month, and they're always warm. And that's the difference it can make. It's not just about cost, it's not just about comfort, it's all of it combined. The average Victorian home is fairly poor. Based on the scorecard tool, which is what I use as a sort of a benchmark, the average home, 3 stars, costs about $1,800 a year just to run the main fixed appliances. So that's heating, cooling, lighting, hot water. That's not all the other stuff. And that's quite a lot of money. The good thing about this, well, it's not good, but the good thing is that it means lots of us have a huge amount we can save if we take some action. I think the reason our houses are typically not too good is we've had a really mild climate, not many good building codes, cheap fuel, and most of us don't really know that much about home energy efficiency, which is why I love talking about it. The 3 main factors of home energy efficiency are the building shell thermal efficiency. It's sometimes called the envelope, and it's just about how well your building keeps warmth in winter that you've generated and heat out in summer. Appliance efficiency is about how efficiently your appliance gives you what you want. So if you've got a heater, how efficiently does it give you heat? An example is an open fire is about 5% efficient because most of the heat goes up the chimney, whereas something like a really new reverse cycle air conditioner will give you, 300% the value of what you put in. User behaviour is something that feeds back into both of those things. It works with everything. You can have a super well-designed house and energy efficient appliances, and it still would be possible to be very inefficient, and the opposite. So building shell thermal efficiency, the key things that I would always look at are zoning, drafts, ceiling insulation, window improvements, wall and underfloor insulation, and these things all play a part. With zoning, It's about creating multiple smaller zones, or the ability to create. You don't have to always have them closed, but to be able to close them so that you can zone areas in to keep warm or cool, or zone drafty areas out. And heating and cooling by zone is always the cheapest option. Here are some great ways you can add zoning, even in places that sort of haven't thought about it when it was built. It's a good example of what I see all the time. There's 2-storey houses where they're trying to heat the bottom and the top and the stairwell in between. Anything you can do to just chop your house into smaller bits when you're heating and cooling is going to help. This is another of my favourite options. You can buy a telescopic pole from the hardware store that you hang a curtain on in a doorway just in winter, and really reduce the amount of space you're trying to heat. Draft proofing is another really good one. Zoning and draft proofing together are usually low cost and quite easy to do. There's a whole stack of places that you can commonly find drafts in a house. I'm not sure if you can see that picture very well. Can you see up the back? Yeah. What I'll do actually though is show you a graph. This one I'm not sure if you'll be able to see properly because it's such a big graph, but this is different kinds of drafts and the impact they have on your building shell efficiency. The biggest impact is an open chimney, like I mentioned. They just suck air out of your house constantly. So it doesn't mean you can't have an open fireplace, but it is important to block it up when you're not using it. And there's plenty of ways you can do that very cheaply or with more fancy things. The other really big impact is a large gap, which would be something like a permanently open louver window, like in a 70s bathroom. Then there's things that people sometimes don't think about, like evaporative cooler vents are actually quite an impact, wall and ceiling vents. And then we go further. This is louver window too, but that's one of the closable ones. So there's plenty of ways. Imagine if you can tackle even 80% of the drafts in your home. They say that the average Victorian home, if you add up all the gaps and cracks, it's like having a metre square window open all the time. Imagine if you could close that or nearly close it. This is just a picture of some of those gaps, wall vents. A lot of people don't realise you don't need them anymore unless you have a gas heater. That's a permanent vent in a window, evaporative cooler vents. These are just random, this is from when plumbing's been done. And that's what a ceiling fan that's unsealed looks like from in the ceiling space. It's just a hole straight into the roof, which you can imagine is a drafty, dusty place. All right, ceiling insulation. The two key things about ceiling insulation is the R value, or the thickness or the ability to stop heat transfer. And the other thing is it's really important that there's even coverage. These are some examples of what frequently happens is you might have perfectly good ceiling insulation and then tradies come along and install something, lights or whatever. They pull it all away and suddenly you haven't got ceiling insulation anymore, or well, you have, but not in big spaces. And when you have 5% gaps in the coverage of your ceiling insulation, it actually halves the value at which it works. So it's very important to get full coverage. This is another example where work has been done and what looks like really good insulation has just been moved around. So sometimes it's as easy as somebody getting up there and rearranging it, putting it back where it should have been. Window improvements is a very favourite topic of mine because there are so many ways you can improve your windows, and it doesn't mean you have to spend $40,000 on new, double glazed units. If you can, great, but there's a lot of things that you can do on a very low budget. The reason windows are sort of third on the list after drafts, zoning drafts, ceiling insulation, is because they're just such a weak point of a building shell. Single pane glass has very poor insulating ability, and even really double glazed glass it's better, but it still allows heat transfer. So it's great if you can do a combination of things. The parts of a window that make a difference are window coverings and pelmets. They sort of go together. Then glazing or glass. frames and external shading. Sometimes, well, quite often I think, the easiest way to start is with improving your window coverings and pelmets, because it can make a really big difference with how you can keep your heat in winter especially. The key is to reduce airflow across the glass. Anything that you can do to stop air flowing across the glass is going to help stop the heat moving through the glass. And the best way of doing it is heavy drapes that's got an invisible pelmet on the top. Another good way is to put something like a honeycomb blind or a cellular blind inside the window reveal. It doesn't work on all windows, but say these windows, for example, it would work quite well because you could put it straight inside. You have no gaps, it's stopping airflow, and so it's really efficient. These are examples of what's called an invisible pelmet. This one's just showing you can make it out of, I think that's weed matting or something. It's something extremely cheap. And this one's pretty cheap too. It's just a DIY invisible pelmet kit. So it's missing the whole boxiness of a traditional pelmet, but it still helps. With glass, there are all kinds of possibilities. There's, of course, double glazing with a brand new unit, and that's what most people do. But if you have really good timber frames, again, these windows are a good example for me. You could easily just take away the single glass and put double glazing in, and it's much, much cheaper. You've already got timber frames, which are the most thermally efficient frame, so keep them. Don't pay for new frames. If it's something like an awning window, then often they can't handle the weight of double glazing. So something like secondary glazing comes into its own. And that's where the original window and the frame stay there completely, and you bring in another panel, usually clear acrylic, which is, it's Perspex, I guess. It's completely clear, but it's lightweight, and that's why it works on sash windows and awning windows and sliding doors and things where they might have trouble if you put a big heavy double pane glass there. These are two pictures showing, this one is from Renew, the organisation. There's also a magazine just showing somebody adding clear acrylic, and he's screwing it in basically with some timber beading. The only reason this is there is because it arrives with this coating so it doesn't get scratched, but that all gets taken off. It's completely clear, you wouldn't know it wasn't glass. And then there's something called DIY secondary glazing, which is the same sort of thing. Actually, I'm getting myself mixed up. There are professional companies that do this, and they'll do it to a very high standard. Then this is a DIY option with a clear acrylic. This is a DIY option with making a pane. I think this is the one. You can just get the metal edgings that fly screens are made from and put clear plastic in them. If anyone wants a link, I can send you an article of how to do it. You just place them in your windows and there you go, you've got a removable second pane, which makes a big difference. And then there's really low cost and temporary options. Well, that removable pane is one of them, but also bubble wrap, which might not look pretty, but if you're renting or if you're on a really low budget, but you're nodding, you've done it. Does it work?
It works.
Yeah.
Yeah, can't see out, but it works.
Yeah. So, yeah, but options for anyone, no matter their, if you're freezing, you might care more about being warm than about being able to see out the window. Frames really do matter, and this is just to show that, so this one at the top is a single glazed aluminium frame, a single glazed window with aluminium frame, single glazed window with a timber frame, a double glazed window with an aluminium frame, not too much better than the single, and then this is the best, the double glazed with a timber or UPVC frame. External shading is the last thing about windows. It's really important, if there's any issue with heat gain, you want to shade your external windows because the key is to stop the sunlight hitting the windows. Once it's there, coverings inside help a little bit, but the most effective thing is to shade it outside. Claire, what's the time? How?
You got 5 minutes?
Okay.
Thanks.
Wall and underfloor insulation. So first, wall insulation. Not everyone knows that you can now have it pumped in. If you're doing renovation work on your house and removing weatherboards or plaster, then by all means the best way to do it is to put in bats. But if you're not, you can just get it pumped in. They come with a big truck and blow it in with this type of vacuum cleaner, reverse vacuum cleaner, and it's very effective. They can do it in either weatherboard or bricks. Underfloor insulation is usually polyester bats, but it's a bit more rigid than ceiling insulation, and you can either strap it in or you can staple it into the sides. Just the key is to make sure you're actually buying underfloor insulation and not trying to use ceiling insulation under the floor. And then the key energy using or generating appliances. Well, actually, I took the generating appliance out, which was solar, because we have an expert to talk about that. But heating, cooling and hot water systems. And I'll just talk briefly about pretty much how to make them as efficient as possible. So efficient heating, any of those building shell upgrades that I talked about, you know, the drafts, windows, etc., they're all going to make your heating more efficient in that it doesn't have to work as hard. If you've closed that metre wide window, then your heater isn't trying to continually replace all that warm air, so it uses less energy. If you do have to get a heating system, then a split system, an individual reverse cycle air conditioner, which is the same as a split system, is the most efficient option. Heating by zone, we talked about zoning already, but that can make a big difference. Setting a thermostat to a good winter temperature, which is about 18 to 20 degrees, is sort of where those heaters will work most efficiently. Servicing and cleaning, and partly, well, one example of that is this is gas ductwork that's just falling apart. It really is important that you look after ductwork of ducted systems. That's the biggest loss that you get in that sort of system is through the ducts. This one was actually part of, I went to do an assessment for someone who had just had their ducted heating system replaced, and she said to them, could you just check out the ductwork too in case it needs replacing? And they said, oh no, it's fine, if it's not blowing cold air there's no problems. And I opened the hatch and saw that and went upstairs. She was really annoyed. She said, I knew, they didn't even look at it. So ductwork like that would have probably a 50% loss of the heat from the unit to coming into your house. So you've lost half of your energy for nothing. This is just a reverse cycle air conditioner with dirty filters. Not everyone knows that you have to clean them. They're very easy to take out and you just wash them with warm soapy water, but you'll find that they work a lot better and don't have to struggle so hard to keep you comfortable. And my personal favourite, personal heating device, which is also known as a PhD, so all of us can have a PhD. I have several. My teenage daughter has one, in fact. It might sound daggy, but it's just the equivalent of a hot water bottle or an electric blanket. But these days they make them into all sorts of amazing things like heated throws and I saw a heated foot pad that you can put under your office chair. This is my heated seat pad that goes in my office, and it means that I most of the time don't need to put the heater on because it's heating my body directly, and I've got my warm woolly jumper on. So instead of heating the air around me, it's just heating me. Everyone should get one. Efficient cooling. A lot of this is the same as with heating. The building shell upgrades will help. The thermostat, servicing and cleaning, cooling by zone. Again, of the most efficient, ceiling fans and ventilation are the most efficient. We really need to think about ventilation when we're, working out how to cool down our houses after a hot day, and potentially adding things like openable skylights at the top of stairs. If you need cooling, then technically an evaporative cooler is the most efficient, but my personal feeling is that whereas 10 years ago they were probably a great option because of all the humidity that we get these days, and not the last couple of years, but we are going to get a lot more heat waves, I think. Personally, I think they're not quite going to cut it anymore, and split systems are going to be the next best thing to do. And last but not least, efficient hot water. There are really good rebates for replacing hot water systems, especially if you have an electric one. The most efficient options will be solar hot water systems or heat pump. And some of the other things you can do for water are just to make sure your shower heads and all of your tapware is, reasonably low flow, because that's reducing the energy to heat the water. And things like insulating the pipes, that's called lagging, and this one has these beautiful valve hoses that also stop heat coming out of the system. That's it for me, and I would like to pass on to Glen now. I'm really looking forward to hearing you talk, and I'd like to go and sit there if that's okay, because I want to be able to see you.
I'm going to talk about renewable energy and a little bit about energy efficiency, because they just go hand in hand. So energy efficiency first, and then generation second. That's the order it should be. I've already introduced where I live, Mount Toogoolawong, but just a bit of fun fact, this is kind of what I do on a daily basis. And is it going to... Yep, there we go. I do a lot of training online, so that's me in my studio, and so I record stuff. I think Frank's watched some of them even. So I talk about technology. Companies send me a lot of products to do technical reviews and also to provide content for the public to learn about products. So that's what I do an awful lot of. I have a bit of fun while I'm doing it. I even have I had a show for 2 years during lockdown because I couldn't go out. So I dressed up as a bad boy rapper and would talk tech. So it was a tech show with me dressed up as a bad boy rapper. There you go. But anyway, let's get on to the main thing. One of the questions I get asked a lot, because there's waves of enthusiasm for technology, and in the renewable space, batteries have suddenly become the thing. Right? People keep asking me, should I have solar? Should I have batteries? And I always say you've got to start with what you want to achieve. Do you want to save money? Do you want to produce and store clean energy? Do you want to be more self-reliant? Be free of the threat of blackouts causing you to have no power? So if you understand what you want to achieve, then you can make those decisions. It's not an automatic. You can't just say a battery is going to make life better or solar panels are going to make life better. There may be much cheaper options. And it starts with reducing electricity. In fact, the cost of electricity is often what motivates people. And one of the best ways to actually reduce the cost of electricity is not pay the loyalty tax. The loyalty tax in Victoria particularly is staying with the same electricity retailer. You think that because you've been a good customer for years, you should be treated well. Well, actually, the reverse is true. You get lured with a churn. Usually someone knocks on the door if you live in suburbia saying, there's a special deal, come to our power company, you'll get a cheaper rate for 1 year. After that, go straight back to the high rate. And if you don't check, you probably don't even realise you're just paying normal rates thereafter. So actually, saving something like 10% on your electricity bill just by regularly changing your electricity retailer. And it's very easy to do. You don't have to get any equipment changed on your home. You don't have to do anything but a phone call and you're onto one of those better plans. So it's actually worth doing, and there's a compare site run by Victorian government. Of course, energy efficiency appliances. There's a government website called energyrating.gov.au, and it's a great place to look for things. It's based on the STAR rating scheme, the mandatory energy performance scheme that was introduced decades ago, has really incentivised efficient appliances because people respond to those little stars on the front of your fridge. They really matter. In fact, we've had to add more stars because fridges, for instance, have got way more efficient than they used to be. It used to be 5 stars, now it's 7. There's a little crest on top for all those extra things. And so the total cost of ownership of something like a fridge is really significant because you're likely to own it for 10 years or more and you never turn it off. So every saving every day really adds up with those extra stars. Just reducing energy use through direct control. You're in charge of your finger. You can turn stuff off, but often you don't realise what's using power. My favourite one is the entertainment console. You've got a remote control, you turn your telly off, there's just one little light on, little red light saying the telly's still there. But actually, there's a whole bunch of things plugged in at the back there. You don't even realise if you touch them and they're warm, they're using power. There's a kind of simple way to find out with your hand. So using some of those sensors that can detect if you're not sitting in front of the television anymore, it turns it off at the wall. So those are automatic power-saving devices. So you see I'm putting it in an order of preference, really. Then solar panels and solar hot water and heat pumps. Now we're talking about generating or using hyper-efficient appliances like a heat pump. If you've done all those first things, then thinking about ways of capturing renewable energy, the sun's free, it's still free, mostly in the world. I believe Turkey actually has a tax. If you put solar panels up, you get taxed.
Really?
Yeah. But apart from that, governments always find a way to grab money off you. You know, rainwater gets taxed somehow. So using free renewable energy directly in your home is a very cost-effective way of reducing the cost of energy, but also it's a clean energy. You're not reliant on another source of dubious, sources, whether it comes from coal-fired power or gas. You know it's coming from renewables. Solar hot water is actually a very mature technology, been around a long time. It works. It's relatively simple. Solar hot water actually, I put it next to heat pumps because heat pumps are actually a solar water heater. People don't realise that. They think they've got to have panels on the roof, but the air is heated by the sun, and the energy in the air is harvested by heat pumps. Even though you might think it's 5 degrees outside, how can that heat pump is a bit of magic. It's a bit of refrigeration magic, basically. A small amount of electrical energy multiplies the benefit of that small amount of energy in the air to make hot water. It's about a 3-to-1 ratio compared to an old-fashioned resistive element hot water service. Lastly, and I put it down right at the bottom, batteries. Don't get so excited about them. It's nice to have them for some reasons. Backup would be one. If you're worried about losing power and blackouts. Now, I must admit, I'm talking about people who are on-grid, Rosemary. If you're off-grid, you need batteries. But if you're on-grid, batteries are more about resilience than about cost saving because they don't generate any electricity at all. They just store it. And so the cost of that purchase can take a very long time to show any benefit, and it depends on how much surplus energy you have to charge your battery with. So I put it last. Often the payback, I've done some modelling for a lot of customers, is about the time the warranty runs out. So 10 years later, warranties run out, your batteries have just paid for themselves if you're lucky. But guess what? You probably already own a battery. It's called a hot water tank. And so a hot water tank is actually an energy storage device that you could put electrical energy into to provide a service that you need every day, which is hot water. So there are many products out there that actually can divert surplus solar into a hot water tank automatically for you. A little boxes that go on the switchboard that divert the surplus energy from your solar to heat water, and that can actually be equivalent to owning a $5,000 to $10,000 battery, because a hot water tank is effectively a battery. Oops, wrong clicker. There we go. Is my roof suitable for solar? Very common question. There's a kind of misconception that you have to have a roof that faces north to be really any good, because the sun is predominantly in the north, certainly in the southern hemisphere. But if you do an analysis, this is a heat map of a roof. Heat map meaning brighter, oranger colour is higher energy and darker is less. It can show that there's actually energy on all of the roof. To give a really good example, I've just picked out 2 roofs in Melbourne, a north-facing roof and a south-facing roof. And I've used the technical term peak sun hours, PSH, which is amount of energy falling on a surface on a daily basis. So on average, a north-facing roof will, at about 30 degrees incline, will get 4.67 peak sun hours. That could be converted into electricity by solar panels. A south-facing roof, it's not nothing, it's 3.48. Remember, that's an annual average. It'll be worse in winter. It'll actually be almost the same in summer because the sun's up there. It's not low. And so really a south-facing roof is 75% as good as a north-facing roof in Melbourne. There you go. If you're worried about south-facing not very good, a south-facing roof in Brisbane is better than a north-facing roof in Melbourne. It's all about latitude. The further south you are in the southern hemisphere, the bigger the difference will be. But anyway, I'm just encouraging you to think that any part of my roof that sees sun, even if it's not optimal, is going to generate some electricity. It can be modelled, and your installer can do those calculations. It's interesting how PV sizes have grown. This graph's a little bit out of date because it's 2019, but we're up to about, the average system size in Australia now is 8 kilowatts. People are getting bigger and bigger systems. Now, it's partly skewed by the fact there's a lot of incentive schemes, which is incentivising more solar. People are often onto their second system coming. Yep. So we're seeing bigger and bigger systems because people know that it's going to save them money. So that's really driven up the average system size. I wanted to just let you know that there are some great rebates. I don't work for the Victorian government, but Victoria is the place to be in Australia if you want to get government assistance. So there's both state and federal programs running for solar panels, but for Solar Victoria, all those schemes, hot water, batteries, even panels for rentals, businesses, heating and cooling options, zero emission vehicles, virtual power plants, which is a bit technical, but it's a way of aggregating lots of systems together to give a net benefit. So all of those schemes right now, I just downloaded this today, are open and there's funding for them. So, for instance, the solar battery rebate, it's dropped from its opening value. It was about 4,800. It's down to 3,500. So the Victorian government realises that as a government, they can directly do stuff like fund big projects like a big battery or a solar farm, or they can actually give the money to mums and dads to put solar and or batteries or solar hot water or energy efficiency onto their homes. And that helps them get to their renewable energy targets. The solar hot water rebate program, there's up to 50% support with up to $1,000 for solar hot water heating systems. I mean, heat pumps are more expensive than a regular resistive element tank, but the cost savings are so great, it doesn't take long for it to win in terms of total cost of ownership, just a matter of years. The problem with hot water services is that people generally don't think about them replacing them until they fail. And then it's a panic. And then it's ring a plumber. Quick, what have you got? I need a new tank. We've got a cheap one here. Yeah, I'll take that. It's cheap to buy. It's expensive to run. So plan for obsolescence. Most conventional resistive element water tanks, unless they're serviced, and no one ever thinks of changing the anode in them, which is a sacrificial anode, probably at around the 10-year mark, depends on your water quality, will start to fail. They catastrophically fail normally. You get a crack and the water comes out and that's it. So be prepared for that. Even think about retiring it before its end of life. The solar panel rebate is the Victorian rebate. You also get the federal rebate. So you get two bites of the cherry. It's not either or. I should point out though that there are special conditions with some of the rebates from Solar Victoria that which ones you can't get all of them. So they keep changing the rules. But I'd suggest if you're interested, go and look at the website solar.vic.gov.au. Okay, let's get on to, that's the federal rebate program. And I should point out, marketing people love to make you panic buy. Around about December every year, you'll see all these ads saying solar rebates are ending. Actually, what they mean is that the federal scheme is slowly winding down. It's been winding down for 15 years, 1 year at a time, in terms of its incentive. And so the rebates aren't ending, they're just winding down in terms of what they call a number of years of deeming. You actually get an upfront benefit proportional to the number of years before 2030. So at the moment we're at 9 years of deeming. So a 6.6 kilowatt system, you're getting $2,500. It's usually taken off the purchase price by the retailer who sells you the system. The interesting thing though, even though it's been dropping since for about 6 years now, the price of solar is still cheap because the panel prices keep going down at the same rate. I shouldn't tell you this, but from an installer's point of view, solar panels are free. The rebate completely covers the cost of the solar panels. You're just paying for labour and the balance of system. Energy bills are designed to be hard to understand. They're really obscure methodologies for talking about energy, what rate you're on, what periods. It's very hard to compare them. And that's why there's actually some services offered both by the Victorian government, but even commercial companies offering you compare services. Now, there's one which come about recently, what they call solar analytics. I've got no business relationship with them. It's actually an energy meter that you put in your switchboard, and the app will tell you what the best retailer is for you. It'll actually watch how you use energy, over a period of time, and it'll say, based on your actual usage pattern, this is your best. They call it the bill optimizer. So it's a really clever idea.
And they're not affiliated with an energy company?
No, they're not affiliated with any energy company at all. Yeah. They were started by some academics from University of New South Wales. Solar inverters. Now we're getting into the solar stuff a bit deeper. What does an inverter do? You hear about inverter air conditioners and inverter fridges. Well, we're talking about something that takes solar power, DC energy, converts it to AC, and can directly supply appliances within your house. But a solar inverter by itself generally only works when the grid's present. It's not an independent system by itself. So it actually needs to have the grid for it to function, but when the grid's there, it kind of like synchronizes with it, and then it starts to feed your home with electricity. Battery inverters can be a separate item. So sometimes you can have a solar inverter and a battery inverter. In this case, I'm just showing the same brands, Sunny Island SMA and the Sunny Boy. The yellow one's a battery inverter, and it can be a completely independent product. Now, this is probably more typical, actually, of an off-grid system, but yeah. So this one takes solar panels, and this one you connect to batteries. But sometimes they're combined into one product, and we call these hybrid inverters, i.e. they have batteries connected to them, they have solar panels connected to them. It's only one product, and that's very compact. So if you're doing a new installation and you might be thinking about adding batteries at a later date, hopefully not too late because products change, they can be what's called battery ready. So it can work as a standard solar inverter, but maybe a year later you go, I think I'm ready, I'm going to add batteries to it. So hybrid inverters are basically an all-in-one solution. There's a couple of examples there. Now, you've probably heard of this company called Tesla. But some people think they're the only battery there is, but there's one of many actually. But they're not truly a battery by itself. They're a battery and inverter in the one box. So it's actually a combined product. And that means it can be added to any existing installation. You might already have solar, and you might go, oh, gee, I didn't buy a hybrid inverter. Does that mean I can't have battery storage? No. You can add an AC coupled battery. And that's what this is. So this is just a device that can connect to your switchboard and provide you with the same service as a battery system. There's some things that make solar panels work better. There's these things called solar panel optimizers. They really come to the fore when you have a difficult roof where you've got shading or multiple facets of the roof facing different angles. They can make every panel work independently of every other panel. So that's a really nice feature for houses with shading problems. And here's a little, it's actually my neighbour's house. It's an aerial, it's a drone picture view. And see, these are her solar panels here. And these are the representations of them here. And each one has its little optimizer on the back of every panel. And you can see who the bad one is. This one here, it's a bit dark and it's producing less energy. What do you think's the problem? The shading of the roof. Now, with a system without those special optimizers on, the whole system would be the same colour because they all work together as one. And it's kind of like stepping on a hose. Just you're stepping on a little bit of the hose, but the water at the other end is affected. So optimizers overcome that problem by making every panel effectively independent.
This is not microinverters.
Getting to that next. These are microinverters, which looks like little boxes that go on the back of the panels, but now instead of working with DC output, they have AC output. They do the same thing. They give you the same, what they call module level optimization. So they're actually, every panel once again is working independently, but they put out AC power. So in a way, they both do the same job. There's some arguments for safety that a microinverter means there's no high voltage DC on your roof. Therefore, it's probably a bit safer. Your call. When it comes to batteries, there's actually a huge range. People think there's only Tesla, but there's actually a huge range. And these days, there's a new battery standard. I actually helped write it. It's on the committee, and there's a lot of restrictions about where you can put it. You can't put batteries in a habitable room in a domestic installation. You can't go in your lounge, your living room. Even though all the marketing from Europe comes with pictures of next to the couch is a battery system, can't do that in Australia. We don't trust them enough yet. So we're a bit cautious. So you've got to work with your installer to find out a suitable location. Commonly, it will be a garage outside the house or a utility room or a back shed. Can batteries be retrofitted? Absolutely, yes. It's actually my son from some years ago. That was an impromptu picture. He just picked up his hat and picked up my multimeter. But what we call AC coupled batteries can be connected to any existing solar system. So you don't have to get rid of what you've already got. You can just add it. You can also add another hybrid system in parallel to an existing solar system. That means you get more solar panels and a battery. That's kind of nice. But there are restrictions on how much inverter capacity you're allowed to install at any one home, any one installation. And that's up to the utility. So you're not the person you pay your electricity bill to, but the company who owns the poles and wires that comes to your house. They'll put some limits on how much inverter capacity they'll let be connected to your home. It's to do with managing their assets, their network. So these days it's getting pretty small, like around about 5 kilowatts on a single phase home is often the limit. So 3-phase allows generally bigger systems. So that can be a restriction. Monitoring is something that's really important when it comes to making sure things are still working. There's a lot of companies, like I mentioned Solar Analytics with their bill optimizer. They actually also can monitor your solar, how well it's working. They can even do historical comparisons, and their little AI engine will tell you that your system's not working very well. Because they'll see that last year in February, there was a certain amount of generation in February, but this year it's not very good, and they know the weather, and they know it hasn't changed, so something's changed at your end. It wasn't the weather, and they'll send you a little report. That's pretty clever. So, yeah, monitoring systems are important for just keeping abreast of any possible problems with this operation of your system. Now, let's try and remember where I put that slide in there. I might actually skip over that one. Economic analysis. All right. So I actually did some modelling on a house in Healesville. We put a system on, actually a friend of mine, he helped build my house, and we wanted to see what the payback was. And so we used some software. These days, there's software that can help people, well, it's really for installers and designers to use, but it can do very accurate modelling on your actual house, how well it will work, what the payback will be, and what the performance will be. So we put the solar here. Now, this is the eastern side of the house, and this is the western side of the house. Remember I said that you don't have to have the panels facing north? Actually, east-west is becoming the new north. And the reason for that is that the sun rises in the east in the morning, and you start generating earlier than a north-facing array. And in the afternoon, particularly in summer, the west, it's actually the southwest even, it's still working on a hot summer's day really well. And that's when your aircon might be running. So it actually gives you a longer generation profile, though it might not peak as high. It's more useful to you for self-use. So without batteries, east-west will give you a better level of self-use of your solar. And there's the economic analysis, just showing the payback. And so for this particular system, for the investment price of $6,300, the payback for them was bang on 5 years. Now, that's pretty typical for a solar-only system. However, if you were to add batteries to the same system, the same house, it pushes out to 10 years. So, and it's a bigger investment. It's now $16,000. And by the way, since I've done this analysis, Tesla have put their prices up quite a bit. So it's probably more like 11 or 12 years, which is beyond the warranty. So I guess the take-home message there, not actually going to be a great investment. Adding batteries, solar was a much better one. That's my house. I'm nearly done. That's my house. I've got a bit of everything, really, because I like to experiment. So I've got lots of solar panels, but some of them do a special job. These ones at the top here directly heat water. They don't do anything other than heat water. They're dedicated electric water heating systems. So some people think solar hot water means thermal panels, like evacuated tubes like these. But you can actually heat water directly with electricity. That's a dedicated system. These panels are waste panels. That means they were going to be thrown out. They're old. They're only 60 watts each. But they look perfect. They're just brown, nice pieces of glass with an aluminium frame. And I was putting a shade area on the western side of my house, and I was going to do it all out of timber. And my friend who was working for me at the time said, Glenn, we've got those old panels out the back we took off some client. They'd be cheaper than wood. Why don't we put those up? It turns out a second life for solar panels can be a carport, a shade area, you build a fence out of them. And what do you know? They still work, so we connected them up anyway. So it's a shade sail primarily, and it also generates some electricity. The house is straw bale, so it's got massively thick walls. I think I was inspired by you, Rosemary. And it's all double glazed with timber windows, etc. So from a passive solar design, long side of the house faces north. It works really well. I've learned from living on a goat barn that you want to build a passive solar home first, and then think about how to make the electrical side work well for you. The sun works really well as a heating source directly with a passive solar design. So last slide, that's my community. Murmura off-grid for nearly 50 years, and happily so. We actually now have a network where we share energy amongst some of the homes. We've got a microgrid where currently 7 homes are connected through a microgrid, and Claire's been there to see it. So that's it.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for 2 wonderful talks and most informative questions.
First question from Elaine is, Glenn, where can you get a service to property at 0.7193 per day as per your bill example? Who was the provider?
I don't know. I've actually almost never seen an electricity bill in my life. And I think I just picked that one off the internet because it's something on my bill.
Okay. And Pauline, this is another provider's question, you may not know the answer, you might know the answer, which electricity providers would you recommend that are green suppliers, e.g. Diamond Energy, and would you consider swapping these providers on a regular basis too, as per Origin, AGL, etc.?
I would look at the green electricity guide. It comes out, I'm not sure how many years. Do you know the green electricity? Oh, you don't pay bills. The green electricity guide, you can just Google that, and it rates electricity companies on their environmental credentials in a variety of aspects, and then it says which is the top one. And that's the thing, PowerShop was the number 1 on the green electricity guide, but once it was bought by Shell, it fell off there, and then things like Diamond Energy came on. A lot of people that were with PowerShop have moved to one that's called, I think, Community Power, and it's actually a community-owned power company. And there's one local to here called Indigo Power. Is that Yea as well?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's community-owned too, I believe. So my personal preference would be go for a community-owned one. Can't go wrong with that.
We'll just take a question in the room now and switch it up. Yes,
With your microgrid and your network, does everybody have solar panels, or does that work better when some have, some don't? So you've got somebody wanting to buy, somebody wanting to sell, or swap.
Okay. This one's now yours is off. Okay, good. It's where I probably need to draw in to explain it, but every house had its own solar battery system existent, and then I reticulated from a centralised system to each of the homes, just like the grid does to you in suburbia. But the benefit is, since we're on one property, we're a cooperatively owned property, we can distribute power across between houses, which you can't do legally in suburbia, right? So when one house has more solar than it needs, the batteries are full, it flows back to the microgrid, which is a common pool. When someone has a deficit, they can draw on the microgrid. So it's a sharing system.
So there's battery storage that's sort of in between.
There's a large central battery system with about 70 kilowatts of solar connected to it, and then each house has its own solar and battery. Yeah, you probably saw it in that first picture. Yeah.
Another question from Elaine. Might be good to ask Glenn how the end-phase system, this is a question relevant to the Install 2030 Yea facilitated on the Pioneer Reserve building, how the end-phase system is monitored through Enlighten when you don't have a Wi-Fi system installed.
Okay, so Enphase is those little microinverters. They also make a monitoring system. It's called the Envoy, and the app's called Enlighten. And there's even a thing called Engage. Everything starts with N. You do need the internet for that monitoring. It doesn't do it locally without it.
Glenn, could I just ask you, you mentioned that the state government has varying discounts or whatever. They seem to vary a lot, and there are a lot of conditions related to that. Do you have any advice to if one's looking at say, I'm thinking about putting on more solar panels, or you know, where to look to get good information?
Maybe move to a marginal seat.
we don't. We're an independent seat, unfortunately.
So it was a bit curious when the battery program was launched, and certain postcodes were eligible. Yes. That's like a marginal seat in there. But anyway, it's politics. But also they do have an agenda which is meet the renewable energy targets. So that's why they're doing so many different programs simultaneously. Yeah.
Mm. And the other thing I was going to ask you, you mentioned about the feed-in. I mean, we've had AusNet here, and they really have cut down the amount that you can feed in. And I notice with my own system that on really bright days, it flashes red because they say, no, thank you, we don't want it today.
Okay, you mean the inverter has a little red light on it?
Yes.
It's probably saying that it's islanding, which means there is high voltage on the network, which is actually caused by too much solar. It's one of the reasons why they're restricting the amount that's connected and how much you can export. We're kind of our own worst enemy in Australia. We're the highest proportion of solar per capita in the world. We just rock stars when it comes to solar. And that grid that we connect to was never designed for it. So it's really struggling under a massive amount of uptake of solar. So we keep putting more conditions around it, export limiting, maximum inverter power, and also the grid wasn't really well articulated. So we've got wires that are too thin, and you try to push power into the volts go up and your inverter turns off, and that red light comes on.
I noticed that on the warm day, bright sunny days in the summer, that this is starting to occur more frequently than it did previously. I don't know whether others experiencing that.
Could I ask, what does that do if the light flashes and it's islanding?
Okay, so island is a technical term. It means the inverter detects the grid is out of specification. It can be too high or too low, but generally it's too high in voltage.
Yeah.
Your house doesn't get disconnected, just the inverter, because it's actually making it worse. So it's automatically disconnecting. A little light will flash saying waiting, waiting. Sometimes it actually says waiting on the screen, waiting for the volts to come down again, and then it tries again. Yeah.
Jeff first.
Yeah, there's a company recently going around Yea, door to door, and they're offering free hot water upgrades. And I resisted because I did some research on the one they're offering. I thought it was a pretty poor thing, but in the end I gave in and I got one. And it's okay, but they didn't have to pay a cent. And they never have another program where they go around and they take, the tip is full of perfectly good electrical hot water heaters.
And the water is fucked, Jeff.
No, it's cool. Yeah.
Shall I talk to you?
Yeah. You're right, there are places that are offering free ones, and I would agree that generally the ones that are completely free are not as good as what you might get if you pay even just a bit. The only way because there's a certain rebate they get for exchanging your system with a heat pump, and that rebate will stay the same. So the only way they can make it free is to give you a cheap system, basically.
They're completely inflexible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. They will only do that one. And yeah, personally, if I had a choice, I'd probably choose a better one. Not necessarily the top of the range one, but yeah, I'd expect to pay something and get a better system. It's good that you researched it. It's great.
Lucinda, thanks so much for your presentation.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Thank you.
Just regarding the wall installation, you talked about how you can screw in and kind of glass, polystyrene, foam, up the walls. The parents have had it done and it's looked a treat.
Yeah.
But I've heard that if you go to renovate or at the end of life of the house and demolish it, can be very difficult to recycle and know to do all that.
Yeah, it's actually very finely spun glass fibre, and it's extremely light. It's a little bit like fairy floss. If you compact it, it's not really gone. And you're right, it's loose fill. So we know because we had a dog door put into a wall, and the guy took out some weatherboards, and suddenly there's all this stuff on the ground. So yeah, it's not perfect. Being spun glass, however, I'm not sure about how it can be recycled or any of that.
It is glass. It's just difficult because it's so fluffy,
fine,
blows around.
Yeah.
It's not compact like a bottle.
Yeah.
At least it's not Mr. Fluffy, which was asbestos that used to come in.
Yeah, and it's not polystyrene either, so that's
Yeah.
They've got something else there.
Yep, from Elaine again. Is that Elaine?
It is.
Glenn, I have an interface system in Yea. I don't have the internet, but I do get a monthly report. How is that?
You're special, Elaine. I think you're stealing Wi-Fi from your neighbours and not knowing it. There's no way they can get a report other than through some communication protocol, unless they put in a dedicated 3G or 4G transmitter, which would be unusual because they have to pay for it.
Would it be happening through the mobile phone, which is there?
You can, but that's only for the toolbox usually, which is for updating the firmware. Installers use that. I don't think, unless you hotspots the phone and it connects to it, that could be the case. I didn't think of that.
She doesn't.
But you're special.
No, they must have a kind neighbour, I think. Yes, David.
Lucinda, you mentioned, as did Glenn, that the heat pump system, the new water tanks, hot water tanks that have been installed, one should think in terms of replacing them every 10 years. With the hot water systems that have been offered and installed in Jeff's house, our house, is 10 years a reasonable time span, or being slightly less inferior, is going to the recommendation that you replace it more soon?
That's a good question. My usual thinking is about 15 years for any major appliance, but I'm not sure about heat pumps, whether that's shorter, because they're sort of newer. Do you know that?
Oh, sorry, David, I thought you meant the resistive element tanks lasting 10 years. You mean heat pumps lasting 10 years?
Oh, well, this company that came around, all government sponsored and all that sort of stuff, and they've replaced our hot water systems. How soon should we be thinking of?
Yeah, when they're going to break. Yeah.
I guess the warranty is your best guide. Yeah. So what's the warranty on the unit? They can make fabulous claims. It's dangerous for them to do this because it's called an express warranty, but they can say, oh, it's going to last 20 years, but the actual warranty is 5. They just made what's called an express warranty. They're supposed to own that. Under ACL.
I didn't think it would be more.
Well, the challenge to me is that cold water after that.
I mean, a heat pump hot water service is very similar to an air conditioner. So how long does the air conditioner last? Though it's not running as often as a heat pump, but it is a compressor. It is cycling. Your fridge is a heat pump. How long do they last? So the technology is quite similar.
We'll find out.
I don't think there's not really a specific answer to that question.
Thanks.
I've got a question about the solar hot water. We have solar just for the hot water, and we've got the instantaneous gas backup. Would a heat pump be a better option than the instantaneous gas backup?
Are you on grid or bottom gas?
oil gas.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Oil gas is liquid money.
So we can still keep the solar panels and then just change the heat pump.
Okay, you'd have to talk to the particular product. It's not easy, but it can be done. Some heat pumps actually are designed to have another source. Yeah.
Glenn, we installed the top of the range German design and built heat pump. Yes, and it's been fantastic. I mean, as you I think you said, it's less than 1/3 of the cost, the current cost. And I had it serviced after a couple of years. The man who came to do it basically said, "This will last you a lifetime." That's express warranty.
Yeah.
They weren't talking like 15 years or so. But of course, they're $3,500 or something, and you said you only get $1,000 or so rebate.
Wouldn't it also be if it was a stainless steel tank? I mean, I don't know if those ones are stainless steel tanks, which then don't have that same issue as the sacrificial anode ones.
Okay, when you're talking hot water and tanks, the main differentiation is stainless steel is a long-lasting design. It doesn't rust internally so easy, though they still do deteriorate. Whereas the cheaper tanks are glass-lined. They literally have a coating of enamel glass on the inside. The thing that kills them is the fact that they are heated and they expand a little bit each time, and then when they cool, they contract, and eventually it causes micro-cracking of the glass. Water gets in between the cracks and starts to rust the mild steel tank, and then boom, the tank bursts. The stainless steel will have a lot longer life, but it is actually about the water type you have, what the impurities in your water are, how that will affect the tank.
So you're implying that rainwater would possibly have, because we got two, on our cottages, we've got two rain-resistant tanks. They're 27 years old. You worry me to death, Lucinda. Actually, you should worry you guys, because it could burst tonight.
Yeah, because I'm staying there.
You get a gold star.
Another question online.
Well, it's a comment in response to being told she's special. Elaine says, "Oh, thanks, Glenn." And then she said, "Sorry not to be there. Great talks, Lucinda and Glenn." Thank you.
Okay, yes, Daniel.
Glenn, I've just got a follow-up question from the shades device that we use with recycled panels. My parents have got that issue as well. They've just upgraded to a new dental system, and they've got quite enough lots of the old system sitting around which they want to get rid of, so they're just stacked up beside the shed. What sort of systems would you say you need to be able to repurpose that old system? What have you done on your shed?
Okay, there's a problem if you connect your system to the grid. You have to use a product called an inverter that's certified, and the certification only lasts 5 years, and the rules change. And so you can't connect an old inverter back to the grid again. But if you're off grid, you're free to do whatever you like within safety reasons. So you can use old panels, you can use second-hand equipment. Your installer will be the person to trust in terms of how it's going to work, but there's no restrictions on it. So yeah, it's just using a shade device connected into my microgrid as another generating source is no problem.
I'm sure there's thousands and thousands of still functioning panels out there now.
It's a bit of a disgrace actually, because we've had an overheated incentive program, and also the regulations for solar make it very, very difficult to upgrade an existing system. It's actually cheaper to throw away your existing system, perfectly good working system, and get a bigger one, because it'll be cheaper than trying to upgrade your existing system. It is crazy. I've got a lot of panels, there are 50 of them stacked at the back of my shed, which I think customers have done exactly that. Not for me, but my students have given me all these panels just for my use. And they're all from perfectly good systems. In fact, including the ones you saw in my house. Those shade ones were 30-something of them came off the house because they wanted a bigger system.
Rosemary, yes.
veranda with those things, wouldn't you?
Yeah. We've got a garden.
Actually, I've got a carport goes with it as well. So yeah.
Any further questions at all? No. Okay, if just before we thank our two speakers, Adam, thank you once again and Claire has done a wonderful job here. In the absence of Elaine, Claire has stepped up, and as you know, as the speakers, she's communicated there. And but as we noticed, Elaine's still in the background, and we look forward to her physically coming. But finally, to both of you, thank you firstly for coming. I mean, it is an effort to come to Yea on a Friday evening, but we are an enthusiastic community about the importance of renewable energy and energy efficiency and microgrids and all. And so I think I certainly learned a great deal, and I'm sure everybody else has here. And to those that are in fact zooming in, thank you, and hopefully you've learned a great deal. So finally, may we thank our two speakers for such wonderful We will be putting summaries up on the website and Facebook and so on, so that if people wish to follow up further, please do that in due course. Hopefully later in the year, we haven't specifically got any more talks planned, other than NAIDOC Week. NAIDOC Week is always special for us in early July, because we have a partnership with the Tongarong people there, and so there'll be almost a week of activities here. But following that, we hope we'll be able to have 2 or 3 further talks between now and December. So hopefully, wonderful to see repeat attendance is always nice, and it's probably a little cold now, but there's still some food out there, and there's still some wine there if you wanted to just stay for a few minutes and chat. But finally, thank you all indeed very much.